Hi there. In this video, I'm giving 7 different practice techniques I use while I'm practicing licks. The lick I'm going to use is from the Christiaan Van Hemert's series from volume 2, and it's an excerpt. It goes like this. Common advice for practicing licks like this is to start slow and gradually increase your speeds. Start from there, make it clean, then gradually increase the speed, etc., etc. That approach never worked for me. I would always run into some kind of block, mental or physical. So here are 7 techniques that you can use to practice things a little bit differently. I have some notes here. So number 1 is chunking. So rather than play an entire piece from beginning to end, etc., break it up into small chunks, starting and then the next chunk. So the idea here is you would take one chunk, and my recommendation is to try to get that chunk up to speed as quickly as possible. So rather than work on this slowly, try and get it fast. And you get that under your fingers and then move on to the next chunk. Now, there's a few important points though. When you're choosing your chunks, or when you're making your chunks, make sure that your chunks overlap a little bit at the beginning and at the end. So for example, for this part, that's not really a good chunk. Maybe a better one to do is this. And for the next chunk, rather than just go, you might want to go, the reason to overlap is because eventually you want to marry these chunks together, and so overlapping makes sure that you've made the right choices for each one of them. So the other reason to do things in chunks and to get them up to speed as soon as possible is that if you practice slowly, you can ingrain the wrong habits both physically and mentally. When you play quickly, your brain actually functions differently. It uses different pathways in your nervous system than when you play slowly. So getting things up to speed, that makes me realize that there's this really tricky part which has downstroke, downstroke, rest stroke. And that's very hard to do at speed. And if you practice it slowly, you might give yourself time to make the wrong movements. So another concept you can use with chunking is rather than start at the beginning and work into the end, like I've been doing now, you can start at the end and work backwards. So for this lick portion, rather than start at the beginning, I might start with, I can work on that, get that under my fingers, then move to the next chunk before it, which is. The reason for working backwards is that it's interesting. It's actually much less stressful to move from something that you don't know into something you know well, rather than the other way around when you're working from something that you know well and moving into something that you don't know. For me, there's a lot of licks that I know at the start of, but I flub at the ending. And so by working at the ending and moving backwards, it's a different mindset. So give it a shot with your licks, break it into little chunks and work from the ending back to the beginning. Number 2 is tempo variations. So if you start practicing slowly and gradually increase speed, as I said, you might box yourself in. And so what you can do instead is just jack up the tempo. Aim for higher than what you're comfortable with, just to see what happens. So for example, if I'm comfortable with this lick at, if I'm comfortable with it at that speed, then I might jack it up quite a bit more, just to see what happens. So when you jack up the speed, you're still trying to keep the rhythm correct, still trying to keep the notes nice and strong. And after you've taken it up quite a bit, explore those high ranges. See where things start to feel uncomfortable. Don't push beyond that, because then that just leads to tension, leads to bad habits, etc. But at least explore it. Then once you've done that, back the tempo way down again and take those things that you've learned. So So I might go. So when I'm playing slow, I'm trying to replicate the motions that I had at high speeds, and I'm trying to understand the choices that my body has made while it's been playing quickly. So when you're playing slow at a slower tempo, make sure that your motions aren't slow. So your picking motions and your fretting motions. So if I take the time to go, I'm not spending, these aren't slow motions in my picking hand. I'm still doing very purposeful and fast motions. I'm giving myself space, but I'm still trying to understand how I'm moving at high speeds, okay? And so now is the time, after I've done chunking and some tempo variations, now's the time when I spend slow practice. Slow practice is an indispensable part of your practicing. You never want to just be wailing at high speeds all the time. You're getting too much tension, too many bad habits, too many weird things. After you've explored speed, then it's time to once again back up and be very conscious and very precise in your movements. That might be overdoing it, but go as slow as you need in order to really get a full understanding, full appreciation of what you need to do. So the fourth thing isn't really a technique, it's more of a mindset and a general awareness of always being on the lookout for tension. If I'm playing the lick and if I notice that I have some tension in my wrist, in my shoulder, in my other shoulder, anywhere in my body, it can even be in my face while I'm playing, then that kind of tension just creeps into your playing. So I do things sometimes like I'll set a timer. Even if I'm playing a long passage, I'll set a timer just to give a gentle gong every 5 minutes, and I'll just do a quick check. Is everything loose? After I play chunk, I'll do a quick check again. Is everything feeling okay? Am I gripping the pick too hard? Am I fretting too hard? For me, tension was one of those fundamental things that really impacted my playing. And I just want to be clear that there's a difference between tension, which is you're fighting yourself, versus activation, because I find that when I'm playing fast and accurately, that everything's active. You know, I feel very alive, I feel very on, but nothing is tense. Watch out for tension and make sure that it doesn't get ingrained and become a part of your technique, because it's very hard to remove in the future. Took me a long time. The fifth thing to try is rhythmic variations. Given this lick, with rhythmic variations, you change the rhythm a bit. I find rhythmic variations are very effective for tightening up my triplet picking. When I play long passages, things can kind of devolve to straight eighths. Your muscles and reflexes get trained to react really sharply, really quickly to those impulses, and that just translates into your general playing. The sixth idea is dynamic variations. Rather than playing the lick 100 times at the same volume, try playing it really quietly or really loud. Try going from loud to soft. Try going from soft to loud, etc. Dynamic variations make things more interesting musically. You start to view your playing and view the lick in a different way than you would if you just hammered through it at the same volume all the time. Reiterating an earlier point on slow practice is absolutely vital. After you've used those different techniques to explore playing the lick and you're finishing your practice session, it's very important once again to do at least a couple of repetitions of really slow, deliberate practice to understand and to reinforce everything that you've learned about playing the lick. Playing the lick slowly and clearly gives your brain a very clear picture about what's going on, and you can actually improve after practicing. The last thing isn't something you do during your practicing. It's after practicing. It's mental practice. So you've worked through the lick and you've got it under your fingers. You have a good feel for it in your head. And so when you're away from the instrument, you can actually do the same thing. You can play through it in your head. Imagine either how it sounds or how it feels at the guitar. And if you can do that, what you can find is that if there's any places where you're unsure about the lick, that actually translates into your playing. And so by spending time away from the instrument, you can work through those things a little bit more quickly, with a little bit less frustration than you would at the instrument. When you come back to the instrument, you've already perhaps overcome some of those problems that you might have run into during your physical playing. Those are the techniques that I use while I'm practicing licks, and maybe there's something there that you'll find interesting for your own practice. None of this is prescriptive, right? You take little bits, work on them for a little bit, and move on to the next thing if that's not working. I bounce back and forth between all of them, and they all kind of complement each other. So the important things are I take a lick, break it down into chunks, starting at the end. I get them up to speed as soon as possible, use rhythmic variations, dynamic variations, always watching out for tension. And I join them together and try to get them up to speed as soon as possible. But then after I've spent some time pushing the envelope a little bit, then I'll do slow practicing to recap what I've done. And then I rest, move on to the next day. Thanks very much for watching. I hope some of these ideas are useful for you. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Have a great day and good luck in your practicing. Take care.